It is Tuesday, the 30th of the night, 2025. The time is 10 minutes past 8. That means only one thing, of course, that there are very many F1 centric threads at which we need to pull. We will talk about it. This is F1 modes of discourse. As much my talking extemporaneously, my very unique brand of B-spec F1 nonsense. As much as it is you. It is a conversation, but we will talk over the next 30 minutes or less about the weather at Singapore, what that means. Lauren Mecki is talking about Red Bull's chances of delivering upon Max Verstappen's not insubstantial potential. 69 points adrift of OJP now with 7 races to go into 5. We'll talk about Yuki Tsunoda, speculation about where is he going to be. Is he even going to be in F1? Maybe he heads to the United States of America and does some NASCAR or IndyCar. We'll talk to about Ted Kravitz, who said some things, 2 of them, one about Abu Dhabi and culpability, and the other about Maximilian Verstappen. Max Goats, not insubstantial competent season to date. Do you know what I mean? Ted Kravitz now doing a U-turn. Z, you're an absolute legend. Happy 4 months, brother. You're a legend, Z. I appreciate you ad infinitum. Go on then, we'll talk about George Russell as well. His future. Put some respect on his name. And this is the point at which I go scorched earth, because I'm done with F1 and its lack of meritocracy. Toto, the boy who cried wolf, will dropkick in the chest one King George Russell, if indeed that means that he gets a whiff of the signature of one Maximilian Verstappen. We know that already. They've been flirting ad nauseum, but now you know it for sure, because George Russell hasn't even got himself a contract yet. We'll talk about that. Palmer talks about where George Russell ranks alongside Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, whether he's better than the McLaren pairing or worse. So too we'll talk about contracts, because George is one of the only one not to have a contract. Chandhok's also talked about Mount Rushmore of F1. We'll talk about who he's excluded, and more to the point, who he's excluded and why. In the first instance, let's talk about weather. We know already that Singapore's always a chaos track, right? Humidity, hot, rain, precipitation. It has in itself everything. Endurance of the drivers will be tested, therefore, this weekend at the Singapore Grand Prix. The weather forecast makes it techier than techie things. 39 degrees Celsius will be the peak temperature over the course of the race weekend, and it will be humid, chat. This is where it gets techie. Only the strongest will survive. Therefore, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate is always 0 around Singapore. You see the drivers each and every single year struggling to extricate themselves from the car. And then you find out that there will be rain, potentially rain on the morning before quali, potentially rain on the morning before the race. A damp, drying track, therefore changeable conditions. Oh, the humanity. It will be techie, therefore. And who of the 20 goes well in changeable conditions? Which one of those guys is the fittest of the fit? It's going to get techie. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about odds and probability, therefore Lando, Oscar and Max are, as near as makes no difference, co-favourites. McLaren pairing, by dint of their not insubstantial performance of the MCL 39 double brake duct and all, are here and here. 33% chance each, 2-1. Therefore, Maximilian Verstappen 24% chance. So when I'm throwing out these percentages, of course, I'm under the umbrella heading, the assumption that you run the Singapore Grand Prix under the current circumstances 100 times. Maximilian Verstappen wins 24%. Only a narrow second favourite to OJP and Lando Norris. Have we then turned a corner? Chat, that's the question. Is this real, this Maximilian Verstappen campaign? Is he back in the Drivers' Championship? Well, it's techie, this. I mean, is it improbable? Abso-flipping-lutely. But is it impossible? You'll bet your bottom dollar it is not. Go and take a look at the 2013 America's Cup. Very similar circumstance. The winner then also sponsored by Oracle, just as is Max Verstappen's car this year, sponsored by Oracle Red Bull Racing. Maybe it's a Poffernier. Maybe it's me drawing parallels. Maybe this is something of a nothing burger. But I will tell you this. If anybody can do it, Maximilian Verstappen can do it, surely. For a couple of different reasons. He's not been bad this year. Suzuka, Saudi Arabia, British Grand Prix, Quali, Imola. I mean, as far as his ability to be the difference, you've seen it on a gazillion occasions, more than one. But that doesn't mean that Tsunoda-san's future is definitely set in stone for a couple of different reasons. A, 6 races back to back to back. He didn't score any points. It will be hard. He will need some GOAT level performance to unwind that as far as Helmut Marko and Lauren Mekies, even though Mekies now has confidence in Tsunoda-san. 6 races. That's record-breaking settings as far as Oracle Red Bull Racing drivers and their underperformance. So where does he go to next? We speculated already that potentially Tsunoda-san could be gone out of Oracle Red Bull Racing for a couple of different he was always seen as a Honda racing driver, no longer the Red Bull Racing driver that was Danny Rick or a Liam Lawson or a Maximilian Verstappen. You saw him at Goodwood, treated as a separate entity almost. I don't think he was ever to Christian Horner's taste for one reason or another. Rewind to the test after Abu Dhabi last year when Tsunoda-san was in the car. Christian Horner and Pierre Vacher didn't even hang around. They flew home. The senior bods, the decision makers over there, the exec level ones, didn't even hang around. That's how divested out of Yuki Tsunoda PLC they were. So you mean to tell me as your principal supposition this, that Tsunoda-san will be an F1 driver under the Red Bull Racing umbrella in 2026? Behave yourself. We know already. They will promote Isaac Hadjar to the seat alongside Maximilian Verstappen, and Tsunoda-san will not have a seat at the Racing Bulls Inn. They will belong to one of, and again 3 doth not go into 2, one of Liam Lawson. It will be Alex Dunn, and of course it will be Arvid Lindblad. Those are the 3 that are competing for the Racing Bulls. 2 Racing Bulls seats. Tsunoda-san will have to go to pastures anew, potentially Aston Martin. Now the rumour's been doing one of these about Tsunoda-san at Aston Martin, to which Aston Martin issued a statement today saying, you know what, we will make a statement about our driver decisions soon, imminently, over the next couple of weeks. We've already decided as far as Alonso and Stroll. Those 2 bods have contracts. However, as far as the reserve driver potentially, we have no idea. Now, recall, this is important, $20 million is how much Honda are paying to Oracle Red Bull Racing to have Yuki Tsunoda alongside Max for this year. 20 million. Do you think for a second the fire-breathing dragon financial resource guy that Lawrence Stroll is, that he would turn down such an offer from Honda if indeed that made Tsunoda-san a reserve driver at Aston Martin? You bet your bottom dollar he would not. And that's what makes me think that they will find a way for him, that Tsunoda-san will potentially be a reserve driver over at Aston Martin. Is this nailed? Absolutely not. But is it the most unlikely eventuality in 2026? You bet your bottom dollar it is not. Oh, and by the way, since we're talking about contracts, it's probably most apropos at this juncture to address one George Russell. For you recall, Toto, the boy who cried wolf, has been disrespecting his charge. Then again, the context here is important, right? If you want a contract in Formula One, you best find yourself in a situation where your team principal is not your manager. Toto's batting for the same team. He's marking his own homework. You think that your manager, as your team principal, is going to get the best deal from you? Absolutely not. And that's why we come to find out that George Russell's team, he's looking to disband it. Why would you have Toto as your management and your team principal? Do you think that's how you get the better deal? Surely it cannot be. And that's why George is looking across at McLaren and Lando and Oscar, realising that them boys are on 30 million a pop, while George is on nothing near. So what's going on there? That's not fair. That's not cricket, especially given his sterling season to date. Jolyon Palmer's come out and said, if you're talking about which one of those 3 drivers are the best, Oscar, Lando or George, that George is probably better given his performance season to date. So why then is he not on 30 million? Because F1 is not a meritocracy. It's about who you know, not what you know. It's not all about your performance. It's about your connections and your management. If your team principal is your manager, there is double contractual jeopardy, therefore a conflict in interest, and George is realising this, and he wants to get new Of course, mate, why would you not get new management? How can you have Toto as your team principal and your manager? That's why Toto's emboldened sufficiently to flirt his eyes over at Maximilian Verstappen ad nauseum on the yacht, having conversations. Summer break last year, there were conversations between Team Verstappen and Toto, the boy who cried wolf. Same thing over the Miami Grand Prix race weekend last year. Toto makes no bones. Mr. Duplicitous, how do you know? Because Ross Brawn has told you so in his book when he was selling Brawn to Mercedes under the aegis of Toto, the boy who cried wolf. So ownership Toto. Ross Brawn said, you know what? You can't trust Toto Wolff, not in business. So what do you think, George? If George hasn't read that book, then he better do. Here's what Palmer said: if we're going to put some respect proper on King George's name, I think McLaren have the best lineup of the four best teams on the grid. I think Norris and Piastri are really high level drivers, and one of them will be champion. However, continues Palmer of F1 TV, I think Russell is at least in that bracket, maybe better than those two, but right in that bracket as well. Mate, of course he's better. Give him the same car. Give him that McLaren. And you don't think, given the mistakes that Oscar made last race, and given the mistakes that Lando Norris has been making all season long, you think George Russell wouldn't put flame, steal the lunch money from the papaya-coloured pairing? You bet your bottom dollar he would. It's chaos, honestly. Buonasera, Isa. I hope you're good. I'm starting to like King George Russell. Oh, the humanity. I don't dislike him either. I don't think he cuts the most likeable figure. I will be honest with you. He lacks for charisma and a bit of humour and comic relief. He's not the most charismatic of fella. Do you know what I mean? And he's not as straight-laced and curt and as abrupt as Max Verstappen, nor is he as charismatic and flary as a Lewis Hamilton. So he's in this weird halfway house, Sir John. And I don't know. I think he needs to pick a side. I wouldn't mind seeing King George just go full heel, you know. Just go full Ayrton Senna from back in the day. Do you know what I mean? That would be different. Oh, and by the way, since we're talking contracts, let me read this out to you because this is important. The lineups that are locked in for 2026 are as follows. Williams, both Albon and Sainz have contracts. McLaren, Norris has a long-term contract, and Oscar Piastri just recently resumed. Haas with Ocon and Behrman both locked in for 26. Ferrari in Charles Leclerc and Sir Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton has a 2-year contract with an option for an additional year if both parties agree. Cadillac with Bottas and Perez both locked in for 26. Bortoletto and Hulkenberg for Audi. Sauber, formerly known as, for 26, both locked in. Aston Martin and Alonso and Lance Stroll also both locked in. Therefore, Alpine have Pierre Gasly, one place open. Colapinto potentially, depending on which side of the bed Fabio Briatore has woken up on. Mercedes, neither one of those drivers have a contract for 2026. Racing Bulls, again, both seats are open. And Red Bull Racing, alongside Maximilian Verstappen, well, we know Isaac Hadjar has the whip hand. Let me state again for the avoidance of doubt, for those of you who missed this, neither one of Antonelli or King George Russell of Kings in Norfolk have themselves a contract for 2026. How, Sway? What are we doing? And I get it. Of course, Toto will do anything. There is no length to which he won't go to sign himself one Maximilian Verstappen. I get it. I understand it. But yet and still, when Toto's already said that he wants the best driver pairing, tell me then how King George doesn't have himself a contract. Toto, the boy who cries wolf. Well, if you weren't his manager, you bet your bottom dollar. If George had a top tier manager that wasn't affiliated, not invested in Mercedes F1 PLC, then George absolutely would have himself a contract. And that's where it gets techier than techie thinks. Toto is also Ocon's manager. It's chaos, but I suppose Ocon's sufficiently distanced, isn't he, John K? Going to be interesting to see Checo being Max again. Oof. Yeah, France. George is quite performance in quite quite performative in the charisma department. It's a bit forced and a bit of teacher's pet among drivers. Hell of a driver he is, though, and that's the bottom line, friends. If you're talking about competence and ability, George is certainly going to surprise people that were looking only at Lando or Oscar. He will become better as well. When he gets the car, you've got to expect that he become a killer, especially given what he's done this season. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking performance, of course, we've got to talk about Red Bull under the aegis of a levelling of the competitive landscape such that Max Verstappen can keep the papaya-coloured drivers in Lando and Oscar honest over the course of the next 7 races. The delta is 69 points. Max, therefore, if he's going to win his 5th, 4 soon to be 5 time, will need fortuitous circumstance. He will need for the racing gods to be smiling on him. Ergo, he will need the likes of Oscar and Lando to be blessed or cursed with reliability or lack thereof over the course of the next 7 races. Let me put this forth. We talked about this the other day, didn't we? In hypothetical terms, if Oscar Piastri finishes the next 3 races under DNF, again, doesn't finish, reliability issues, and Max Verstappen wins each of those 3 races, Max Verstappen will only be 6 points clear of Oscar Piastri. That is techy. Max is going to need all the look, and I know there's the sprint races included in that, but I say all that to say this, that it's the steep, the hill up which Max will need to climb is steep as far as its gradient, not impossible, but implausible, improbable. And Mekis to that point has said the following. And by the way, on Thursday we're going to get Dr. Obbs on the show. I want to understand about Red Bull. What have they done? And are they really a title contender now? Can that RB21 really live with the MCL 39 and all of its double brake ducted glory? Lauren Mekis says a couple of things have happened. Singapore will never be the strongest track for Red Bull. It just won't be. It's too techy, too many medium and low speed, medium duration turns. And again, that's not the natural habit, never has been, never will be, of this Adrian Newey RB21 build. It will never be. But Mekis has said that they've tinkered for a couple of different things, right? You remember the Italian Grand Prix, they bought the floor and the floor fairings. You remember they've done some sexy things with the wing beam, with a view to dial out the snap oversteer. You know that already they've dialed out the understeer that Max Verstappen kept complaining about over the past 24 hours. I'm on -5 brake bias and this thing still won't fudging turn. We understand there's been a paradigm shift in the working culture over at Oracle Red Bull Racing. Now Mekis is listening more to Max Verstappen when he said to take more downforce points out of the rear wing at Monza and leave the rest to me. I will be the balancing figure. I will be the difference. That's what Max Verstappen said. And Mekis said, you know what, I trust you. And look what's happened since. 3 race wins back to back to back. And I know correlation, comma causation. The former does not necessarily imply the latter. But you'll forgive me for thinking that Lauren Mekis is the driver, the key driver, the most material of them as far as Red Bull's upturn in performance. And he said this to dampen expectation or manage Red Bull fans' expectations at the very least. He said that those upgrades, again, they're going to be lasting, that their durable competitive advantage will ensue over the next 7 races, that they won't fade away. But yet and still around Singapore, he predicts that it will be difficult at the altar of the aforementioned difficult turns, contoured track, or each of which RB21 doesn't like. Curbs doesn't like it, RB21. But Mekis says this. Mekis says they've improved, they've upgraded. They don't know. He doesn't know whether they'll be as quick as McLaren. But what he does know is that there will be no Singapore, there will be no Hungary's, 2024. It's not like their performance will just drop off the cliff. You won't hear Max Verstappen complaining about understeer and -5 brake bias ever again, or at least not this season. And I'm here for it, Lauren Mekis. I'm bought into Project Red Bull in 2.5 all of a sudden. I never thought I'd be saying this post Christian Horner Red Bull Racing, but I mean, they're doing bits over there, aren't they? Upgrading the car, etc. Here is hoping. I need to talk about Karun Chandhok, who went on the F1 Nation and said a couple of things. The route Rushmore of F1 is always going to be a conversation. Who do you put on there? Who do you leave out? Of course, Max will win if you give him the option. That's just his mentality. Karun's TW. This is the Silverstone upgrades with some running time, nothing to do with Mekis. It was a good shout visual. There is lead time as far as upgrades, vesting, and seeing performance upside. Right, Michael. Guess the answer is why George ain't getting a raise. They gotta give him a raise, friends. I'm not having that. They must. JP, what did he say? Daniel, go on then. Let me tell you what Karun Chandhok's gone on to say, and this is going to be important. The Mount Rushmore of F1 as far as drivers, as soon as it comes up as a conversation, that's the F1 conversation for the night. Is it Senna? Do you exclude Michael? Do you put Max on there, notwithstanding the fact that he's still in the midst of his career? Can you put Sir Lewis on? Do you close your eyes to him taking his legacy in this year in that Scuderia Ferrari car? Or do you just pay attention to 2018 when his flame was burning at its brightest? Can you put Prost on there, bearing in mind the fact that Senna beat him every single time they raced and kept it on track in 1989? It's a conversation, chat. It is a conversation. And Karun Chandhok, in his Ask Me Anything, said the following. As far as his Mount Rushmore, he has Prost, Senna, Schumacher, Lewis, and he's cheated here because, of course, there's only 4 on the Mount Rushmore. And he includes Jim Clark on that list. Not a bad list. And he continues because there's the omission of somebody that's quite relevant to this channel, to this season, to Formula One at the moment. He omits to mention Max Verstappen because he says that Max Verstappen needs to finish his career for... How very dare you, Karun Chandhok. Now, I don't know which one of those you're going to take off to include Max on that. You know what I do know, actually? Alain Prost, go on and let's have this conversation. I do know, I've been thinking about this ad nauseum over the past couple of weeks. Alain Prost, as brilliant as he is, I don't think he'd be able to live with Max Verstappen in equal machinery. There it is, I've said it. I've said it. Blasphemy, some will say, but I've said it. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Why? Because I think Max was too blindingly quick for Alain Prost to cope with. Shez from the Shakedown always says that Max, in his aspect as a racing driver, is the perfect blend of the consistency and stoicism of an Alain Prost with the blitzkrieg quickness of an Ayrton Senna, and I think he's nailed it. Full stop, new paragraph. How very dare you, Karun Chandhok, not put Maximilian Verstappen, foursome say, soon to be 5-time champion, on the Mount Rushmore of F1. But it's a conversation and it's subjective, and of course it is down to preference to a greater or lesser extent. Karen, who says Judd, what an absolute clown, says Sir John Perry. According to Peter Windsor, Jim Clark is the best. TWM, I think Jim Clark... listen, who am I to disagree with Peter D. Windsor, friend of the channel? I think Peter's not the first person, nor will he be the last, to say that Jim Clark was the very best in equal machinery. Like people who saw him and were closer to him. Peter interviewed Jim Clark, and not interviewed, but he spoke to him as a young kid on the plane when Jim, do you know what I mean? He was close enough to Jim to see and feel and understand who Jim Clark was as a driver. You speak to Matt Bishop and Richard Williams on the and Colossally That's History podcast. They say similar things to. So I'm humble enough to defer to those who are more, whose wisdom is more infinite, is more expansive on all things F1 centric than my own. And when you speak to these guys who were around in the slipstream of the Jim Clark effect, they'll tell you that Jim Clark was one of the, if not the best that they'd ever seen. Senna doesn't have the temperament against Max or Michael. He was crying in 94. Yeah, but he had behave yourself, visual. He had a difficult car. That car was a monstrosity in 94. I don't know how, and again, this is something that Shez says, I don't know how Senna did so well with that bloody car, putting it on pole as near as makes no difference every single race. Testament to how good Senna was. And I think he was blitzkrieg quick enough to be on that Mount Rushmore alongside a couple of those guys. Oh, and by the way, we've got to talk about some Ted Kravitz. I know you guys don't like Ted Kravitz. I get it. I understand it. I'm not sure if I like him anyway. I was dropping him a message with a view to get him on the channel. And up until now, Ted Kravitz has not come back to your boy Cameron CC. And you know what? I think that's rude. But nevertheless, I always had a thing for Ted Kravitz. Always backed him, always liked it, notwithstanding him being a douchebag. He's not a douche. He's an anti-hero. Is that the right word? There is something about Ted Kravitz that millions and millions of F1 fans all around the world don't like. And now all of a sudden, I understand it. Ted Kravitz impersonation in 1, 3, 2, 1. I can't do it, friends. That needs some practice. So go on then. Ted Kravitz has gone onto a podcast, the Performance People podcast, I want to say. I will link it in the description. It's a good one. Again, the context is this. Ted's going on podcast now. But by the way, Ted's only got 1,600 views on that podcast. I would put forth my supposition this way. If Ted were to come on Cameron CC, I think he'd get a couple more views than 1,600. You know what I mean? Get his book some more publicity. But I digress. Here's the problem with Ted Kravitz. He said a couple of things around Max Verstappen, and Max fans all around the world are waiting for Ted Kravitz to step out of line again. Not dissimilar to the one that they called Damon. You remember Damon said all that stuff about Max, and then all of a sudden he had to put down his Sky Sports F1 mic. Damon's comments then was something to this effect, that Max Verstappen uses Dick Dastardly tactics, that if everybody tried to overtake using Max Verstappen's modus operandi, then nobody would be able to stick a move ever. He said something again more pertinent. This was the one that burned me as a Max Verstappen fan. Ted K can get fudge, says Sir John. He's a controversial figure. We will talk about him. He says something about Max here that's quite pertinent. If the 94 car was a dog, Damon wouldn't have competed. But I mean, they developed it, didn't they? It wouldn't have competed for the title. Mika outqualified Senna on day. Behave yourself, visual. If things don't go Senna's way, he mails it in. Bloody Nora visual. How controversial. And you guys are too kind as well, by the way. How controversial. I feel like we need 60 minutes by itself, visual, to discuss for the multitudinous foibles and brilliance of Ayrton Senna. Cam's linguistic flexibility makes Kravitz insecure. I'm sure he'd be welcome to come on any time now, but he won't. How did Ted Kravitz? I'll link in the description, JP. How did Ted Kravitz get 1,600 bots to watch? Go on then, let's talk about Ted, because I've always been a big fan of Ted until he didn't respond to my emails. Get back to me, Ted, and we can have a proper conversation about your book and get some people to buy it, maybe. Apparently it's a good book, this F1 Insider, but I'm not going to plug it until Ted becomes a man and comes on the best goddamn put. No, I'm joking, I'm being stupid. Go on then, here's what you need to know about what Ted Kravitz has said. In the first instance, controversially, he talks about Abu Dhabi. And again, this is what got him into trouble in the first instance. Embargoed with Red Bull, because Max and Vermeulen and Jos were like, for crying out loud, are you still talking about Abu Dhabi 21? Like 3 years later, haven't you got anything else to talk about as a pit lane broadcaster, a pit lane reporter, come journalist? Surely, Ted Kravitz, you can talk about something other than Abu Dhabi. You know what? As a matter of fact, Max and Clan said, we're not going to talk to you, chap. 3-time champion at the time. And we're going to give you no air. Don't even think of putting the microphone in my face since you want to talk about Abu Dhabi 21 so bloody much. And it was controversial, of course, then. But Ted and Sky were forced to climb down. Why? Because they need some Max Verstappen coverage. He is their lifeblood. Don't believe me? Go and talk to Auto Addiction and see what their numbers did over the course of the race weekend. The NLS Race 9. One of these, all their videos are like 200,000, 300,000, like 250,000, and then all of a sudden Max comes along and blesses them with 2.5 million. That's an order of magnitude of 10. That's what Max Verstappen's doing, and ipso facto, a rising Max Verstappen tide floats all motorsport boats. So of course Ted Kravitz and Sky F1 had to back down and eat themselves some humble pie. But now all of a sudden Ted Kravitz, more diplomatically and tactful now, is talking yet again about Abu Dhabi 2021. there is a chapter, the final chapter in his book F1 Insider speaks to this, and he went on this podcast. The link will be in the description, and he expanded. Roll the clip, Cameron.
It's a factual chapter. There's nothing that anybody, what I hope people don't do is read the Abu Dhabi chapter, get enfrothed about the whole thing once again, and say that I'm some kind of apologist for one side or the other, because there's just no point. If you're if you feel it was that there was some intent to make sure that Lewis Hamilton was not an 8-time world champion for any reason that you're imagining, then you can take that belief with you into your days, and you can carry on with that, and you can believe what you want. There's no evidence to support that. There's no evidence that Michael Massey had a preference either way, who was world champion. He was just, with a load of pressuring from the teams,
just made that decision.
And with a load of intentions that he was aware of, that we don't really want safety championship races to finish under safety cars. We'd rather there was not a red flag, which would lead to one more chaotic lap racing, because we had one earlier in the season in Baku, and it was a bit of chaos. Let them race. There are all these sort of three things that he was doing and sort of encumbered by, I think, under pressure, that led him to make the decisions that he did on the day.
Tread carefully, Ted. The cult LH Mafia will come for you. They will come for you, sir, talking things like that, talking all of this rational mindedness. He will get techier than techie things for you. But I don't think he's a million gazillion miles off. TWM, the name of the book, F1 Insider. I don't think he's a million miles away from the truth here. I do think there is something to be said, and it's not anything to do. Max was brilliant all season, bet you, but you can take that one to the bank. Shez says it best, that if Max retired at the end of 2021, then automatic Mount Rushmore status. So brilliant was he, so pant-wettingly quick was Max Verstappen all the way through 2021. If Lewis Hamilton is him, then the F1 maths has to, you've got to choke up one answer, that Max Verstappen was brilliant all 2021. Of course he was. He raced Lewis Hamilton and gave him nightmares each and every single race. Full stop, new paragraph. However, if we're talking about the FIA and Liberty Media, did they need a new champion? Did they need a fresh new face that wasn't Sir Lewis Hamilton's, if indeed they were going to capitalise on 2021 and Drive to Survive and their success as the only international sports franchise in COVID to keep putting on international live events? I mean, it wouldn't hurt. Was Lewis Hamilton becoming boring? Well, how many times can a champion win back to back to back before you turn viewers off en masse? Non-rhetorical question, and there is another clip. I don't hate what Ted Kravitz has said there, but there will be cult LHs. There will be fundamentalists of the Sir Lewis Hamilton variety that will run roughshod over all of that. It's going to get techie. By the way, Ted Kravitz we talked about Damon Hill, and I feel like for sometimes Ted, when talking about Abu Dhabi, can sound a lot like Damon Hill used to when he had a Sky Sports F1 mic in his hand. I'm not sure that there is bias in there, but you can forgive Max Verstappen fans all around the world for thinking that he is. On this occasion, however, Ted Kravitz takes a different tact when he's talking about Maximilian Verstappen, under the aegis this time of Max Verstappen momentum, a rising Max Verstappen tide floating all Formula One boats. The naysayers on the back of this season now have to take 10 or 20 or 30 seats. How can you talk about Max Verstappen under the umbrella heading of anything other than greatness, sporting endeavour par excellence, on the back of the evidence of this season and last? Mention no names: Brazil 24, Suzuka 25, British Grand Prix qualifying 25. There are too many. You have a cacophony of evidence, now that underlines the point, and Ted Kravitz is getting on side. Check this out. Roll the clip.
About Max Verstappen, while we're talking about this idea of one driver really getting the car and another not necessarily. Like what is the deal with that? Is he just the most extraordinary driver and needs a particular setup that nobody else can seem to manage or deal with? I mean, what is the story behind that? It feels like if you take Max, you might sacrifice the championship as a constructor because he's all about that driver being able to drive that car. Can anyone else do it alongside him?
Yes. I mean, Checo Perez came close. They won Constructors' Championships with Max and Sergio Perez. So he's been made to look pretty good, considering his replacements, Liam Lawson and latterly Yuki Tsunoda. So there should be a driver who can do that, but they haven't found him yet. And Max is just incredible in terms of knowing exactly what he wants and knowing what needs to change to get it. And Monza was a totally perfect case in point, whereas they were a bit worried about tyre wear. They thought, look, we have to run a bit of downforce for the tyres because otherwise you sort of slide around in the corners and that wears tyres out and then we're just going to go backwards. And so we come up with this wing, Max, hope you like it. And it's Friday and he thought, it was okay, it was all right. Saturday morning, he's like, could you shave some bits off that wing? It's like, what? The wing that we already thought was like the lowest downforce wing possible? Yeah. Well, you want me to take some more downforce off it? Yeah. Can you like get a dentist drill out and like shave some bits off, take even more downforce on? Yeah, but Max, it might, muller us in the race because we're going to have these tyres that move around. And so, I'll be all right. I'll fix that. It's fine. And so it did. And so, as the team boss, Lauren McKee said, Max pushed us in quite a unusual, setup direction, but he made it work. And the way he transformed the car, he was able to control the tyre graining, the tyre. So he had it all under control. Banks of engineers, people with PhDs at Red Bull, they were like, this is never going to work. Max Verstappen, it's like, just do it. Can you please do what I say, please? And I'll make it work. And was quicker than the McLarens, made them look silly. The amazing
about
made them look silly, Ted Kravitz. In the first instance, let me say this, if Teddy K is watching, welcome. Like, put your feet up, chap. We've been expecting you for a long time now. Go and grab yourself a beverage. Do you know what I mean? You're in Max Verstappen's house now. Take your time, chap. Again, we've been expecting you for some time now, ever since 2016, sir. And between now and then, it's been 9 years, as near as makes no difference. I'm glad that Teddy K now is leaning into it, as they all are. David Croft, Karun, Chandhok. The evidence is too much, lest you wish to be declared even an F1 abbot of unreason. Now all heads must bow and all tongues must confess that Max Verstappen may be the greatest. Definitely one of. It's going to get techie. Go on, now let me talk about this Ted Kravitz piece. I'm glad that he's come to the fore, that he brings himself now to the congregation and wants to repent for his sins erstwhile at the altar of Maximilian Verstappen slander. How very dare he call Max Verstappen into question and keep talking ad infinitum about one of the goatiest performances I've ever seen in my life, that is Max's in 2021. Of course, Sir Lewis Hamilton was Sir Lewis Hamilton in 2021, but he made mistakes, didn't he, of material consequence at Baku. So too did Max Verstappen, but Lewis is him though, 7-time champion. And that year, I'd never thought I would see somebody fend off a fire-breathing dragon in Sir Lewis Hamilton on fresher tyres in the dying embers of a Kota Grand Prix. Are you having a giraffe? And likewise, never ever did I think I would see a driver drive away in equal-ish machinery from Lewis Hamilton around Silverstone. Care? No chance. Absolutely no chance. And he's only built on that, hasn't he? 4 years later, and that's literally all that comes out of Ted Kravitz. It's ridiculous. He does like to talk about Abu, doesn't he, sometimes? Only thing I remember about 21 regs was some barge boards and some... the bloody RB16 chaos... RB16B, if you only see it up in person, it looks like a seesaw. Joe says, Cameron, I told you that Max is better than me thinking. You might be right, sir. I'll show you a clip in a minute that underscores that point. We could see 5 back-to-back championships is enough to tie viewers off if Red Bull gets things right. Saviour, if you're talking about 4 soon to be 5 time, we talked about it earlier, that 69 points is a lot. It's a big delta. Max will need luck. I mean, he's brilliant enough, definitely, but he'll need some good fortune too. I think Ted Kravitz lost a lot of money on a bet in 21 and he hasn't gotten over it. No risk, Mr. C. Oh, safety car for Monaco when Checo crashed was on purpose. KJ. It's going to get techie as we go into the Singapore race weekend, and I'm here for it to see whether proper now, beyond reasonable doubt, Red Bull have built themselves a car. We'll have Dr. Obbs on Thursday and we'll be asking him some proper questions because he'll be more acutely aware of the circumstance over at Milton Keynes, Oracle Red Bull Racing, than I and you and me and we. It's going to get techie. Between now and next time, you guys have been legends. I will see you same time, same place tomorrow. But I digress.